Hello, everyone. I'm Muzayun, and I'm excited to give you a brief overview of our research paper on conceptualizing hyperlocal information systems for developing countries. I'm presenting on behalf of myself and my co authors Arjun Singh, Erin, Arnesen, and Saurabh Srivastava, all at Google. Hyperlocal information is information oriented within 1 to 2 kilometers of a designated person or area, often at a neighborhood level or within a single postcode. In developing countries, obtaining such information with a degree of specificity needed in time and space is challenging. There's not a widely adopted mobile tool that's updated with such frequency or that helps people understand what's happening nearby. People who do not see online search tools as a first place to learn about subjective and hyperlocal answers. And in developing countries like India, it's hard for users with less digital literacy to formulate search queries on the internet, or they struggle with not receiving relevant information in their local languages. And this void is often filled through co opting globalized information systems, for example, WhatsApp and Facebook groups, or some grassroots digital and non digital efforts. There's a strong reliance on the word of mouth through known and unknown networks and therefore social and collaborative information seeking. In this paper, we examine and then present the nature of hyperlocal information needs in developing countries, and our primary contribution is the empirical evidence in the manner in which sociocultural characteristics play an important role in the interactions among people. We discuss findings from our research in light of our available literature and thus propose a conceptual framework for thinking and designing of a formal, open, culturally relevant hyperlocal information system for the developing countries. Our research was conducted in three countries, India, Indonesia, and Nigeria, roughly for over 3 years, and it involved exploratory and longitudinal studies in three countries, followed by a large survey in India and semi structured interviews in all three countries. We also conducted interviews with local well known figures, resident welfare associations, and local experts. We engaged with local researchers in all three countries to facilitate this research in local language and participants' preferred languages. In our research, we found that big cities, people use a blend of both internet search and human sources to get their local answers. However, 87% of our participants ranked word of mouth, asking friends and family and local people the most relevant hyperlocal information source in both tier 1 and tier 2 cities. In fact, in many cases, people did not expect to find hyperlocal information pertaining to their neighborhood on the internet. For the longitudinal research, we obtained 19 categories of information that our participants seeked from their neighborhood communities. And our survey results further helped highlight the top information categories where the gaps was perceived as highest by the participants. That is, these were most needed and not served well for the people. Those are hyperlocal shopping and small businesses, rentals, local jobs, government services, hyperlocal needs, and hyperlocal events. We discuss the details for each of these in the paper. Our research indicated that our participants sought information on two primary constructs, value and validity. We define value as criticality, which is correlated with the importance of the need for specific information, and validity, on the other hand, is determined by the timeliness or the temporal usefulness of a particular information. For an example here, say for Shashwati and her family of five who relocated to a new neighborhood in Calcutta, a question like what is the water timing in this neighborhood remains relevant for the longer duration of time for the community, but others like where is Ramrila playing today is a kind of information which is of lower consequence and does not stay relevant beyond a fixed time. We observed people who were new to the place or those who had major change in the life stage faced extreme difficulties in finding information they required. In one of our interviews, a newly married female participant said, and I quote, "In life, we meet a lot of strangers we have to trust sometimes." She had married her husband after meeting a few times in an arranged marriage and moved to a new neighborhood. She lacked access to any WhatsApp. Neighborhood group at the time of our interview. In contrast to that, we learned from those participants who had been around for a long period of time in the city were the source of a lot of local knowledge. They showed strong willingness to share with the people in need and be seen as an expert. Like an example here, participant expressed, "What I might know, you could assume it was trivial, but for another person, that trivial piece of information might be the biggest thing that they need to know." And I further quote on this: I like to help others with something useful and feel I know something. These are some examples of cultural contexts that also we observed in the research, which impact how people engage and interact with within the hyperlocal setting. Some of these cultural contexts include, like in Lagos, for example, the communities were found to be more welcoming to outsiders, a social norm which played a huge role in enabling participants to reach out to the neighbors for help. In Indian cities, for example, the diversity caused participants to look for cultural affinity, especially for migrating populations, geographical location, language, caste, religion. These are very important factors for relatability. Another example, in Indonesia, we noticed a culture of shame. Participants were more conscious of how they posted and replied to group messages, as it would affect their social image. This led to the need for certain level of anonymity to be able to answer and ask for socially awkward information. In Indian neighborhoods, also Indian neighborhoods are heterogeneous and are complex in with differences in language, status, caste, and tech maturities. Emerging tech users and advanced tech users, they live in the same neighborhood but seldom intermix offline. This was very prevalent in Lagos too, where the neighborhoods are segmented. The rich participants lived in gated communities, a side effect of which was reduced mixed class interactions. Similarly, local WhatsApp groups were formed typically around interest groups, residential buildings, or society complexes. Prior research has also shown gentrification as a problem in the Western countries, highlighting that the dynamics of social interactions among residents impacted how they engaged online too. And this issue manifested in India when people represented with their full name on the design artifact, that impacted how participants decided to answer their questions, because often the last name was representing their caste. We also ran experiments to mitigate such risks and avoid biases, which we also present in the paper. In geographical online communities, women and people who are non binary often felt uncomfortable posting content for fear of harassment. Women participants were also worried about posting content on online public groups. For that reason, their knowledge of the neighborhood was often not captured. And second to that, English as a language for interface is familiar to the advanced users, but not does not really traverse all segments of the population. For the hyperlocal setting, when there is an influx of people and that is high, people spoke many different languages, and we found that English acted as an exclusionary mechanism where other languages did not, such that if a user would read a query, they would hesitate to respond or to pose their own question for fear of incorrect grammar and spelling. And this relationship was not seen in the Indic languages. For any hyperlocal information system to be useful to its users, it needs to provide timely, actionable, and trustworthy information. However, for most subjective and deep answers, participants showed willingness to wait. Providers need to prove their credibility as first time answerers, and their familiarity and with the neighborhood and the expertise boost trust. Prior research in developing countries highlight that the motivation for information providers for answering in the known social context, and while as we found comparable motivations in the hyperlocal settings, and for example, those were intrinsic motivations like altruism, belonging, reciprocity, and extrinsic motivations like rewards and recognition. With these findings and building on top of the previous research work from other scholars, we present a conceptual hyperlocal framework to guide practitioners whether they are designing bottoms up for systems emerging from the community, or adapting an existing hyperlocal system for a different community, or building a new hyperlocal system altogether. We identified two user groups: information seeker or information provider. These are two user groups, and the frequency of queries from the information seekers is highest when they enter into a new neighborhood as new shifters, and the frequency of the information providers interactions increase over time as the information system becomes more trustworthy. At the community level, simple historical neighborhood information and public initiatives for browsing behaviors is required to foster collective knowledge and sustained engagement. A hyperlocal information system needs to adopt interactions for the mixed and multi language use, and safe environments can be supported through design explorations to retain partial anonymity, such as identity shields or restricting usage of particular geography, or disabling precise information sharing. Moderation or reinforcement of community guidelines like the neighborhood level promise can help create a spam free information system. The system should take account of local appreciation of fairness and content relevance for categorization and ranking information by collective signals, by obtaining collective signals from diverse user groups as compared to globalized ranking techniques. And closing the loop on the information provided will be vital for providers to be engaged, and we need to enable building connections and social capital through design of such platforms besides functional communication. We believe emotions associated with belongingness and they could activate powerful feedback loops. Given these results, there is room and design opportunity for sophisticated next generation hyperlocal information system with these considerations of identified complexities and also within larger sociocultural boundaries to augment the information exchange in developing regions where the local interactions are usually in person and have a high appreciation of word of mouth. Our future work also includes evaluating certain trust indicators. Next, we also want to understand the applicability of the framework in socio-cultural settings in other developing countries, rural areas where neighborhoods are sparsely populated. On the other hand, on the community component, we seek to further validate over the longitudinal period that when a hyperlocal community is empowered with the right hyperlocal information exchange tool, how does it help and create a sense of belonging and connectedness between the residents?